A sperm whale surfaces off the Kaikoura canyon, and the first thing you notice isn't the blowhole or the size of it. It's the skin. Circular wounds pale against grey hide, some overlapping so many times the pattern turns to scar tissue on scar tissue. Older bulls carry so many of these marks they blur together into a kind of map, a record of something that happened long before the whale ever broke the surface. No one wrote that record. No human being has ever watched it happen. The sperm whale is the largest toothed predator that has ever lived on this planet. It hunts using the loudest sound any animal produces, source levels measured at 236 decibels underwater, according to acoustic surveys published in the marine bioacoustics literature. It dives further than almost any other mammal, and it does this hunting in a place with no light at all. And on its skin, in circular wounds and hooked gouges, it carries evidence of something down there that fights back. This is a forensic case built without a body, without an eyewitness, and without a single frame of footage. Everything we're about to walk through comes from two sources only: the marks left on survivors and the remains left behind in stomachs. That's it. That's the entire case file. No sperm whale has ever been filmed engaging a colossal squid at depth. The American Museum of Natural History puts it plainly in its own permanent exhibit material. Paleontologists can explain how we know these two animals encounter each other, even though no human has ever witnessed it. So we read the scars instead. Start with what's actually documented, because some of what gets repeated about these scars doesn't hold up. Popular retellings describe sucker marks the size of dinner plates, 20-30 centimeters across. That figure doesn't come from a measured scar, it comes from a mix-up. The dinner plate comparison in the marine science literature refers to squid eye diameter, not wound diameter. The Smithsonian's own invertebrate pages describe a giant squid's eye at up to 10 inches across, and note that's the origin of the dinner plate description. The scars themselves, where they've actually been measured on stranded and hunted whales, top out closer to 10 centimeters. Still a wound, still a story, just not the exaggerated one. There's a second correction worth making early, because it matters for how carefully this case has to be built. The most authoritative institutional sources, the Smithsonian, the American Museum of Natural History, attribute most of these classic circular scars to giant squid, Architeuthis, not to the colossal squid, Messonychoteuthis hamiltoni. These are two different animals. They aren't interchangeable, and much of the popular internet treats them as if they were. The stronger, more specific link to colossal squid comes from a narrower body of work. Researchers studying colossal squid depredation on Antarctic toothfish and squid remains recovered from whale stomachs describe wound morphology distinct to this species. Deep punctures on the softer parts of a whale's body and long scratches consistent with a sucker ring lined not with smooth cartilage but with teeth. That's a real, if thinner, evidentiary thread. It's the one this case has to lean on. And it points toward the same conclusion the broader squid scar literature does. Something down there is armed, and something down there is willing to use those arms against the animal trying to eat it. There's also a competing explanation for some of the head scarring on mature male sperm whales, and honesty about the case requires naming it. In 1979, aboard a whaling fleet vessel, a researcher named Hidehiro Kato examined 48 male sperm whales in the South Pacific and catalogued their tooth scars by severity: none, indistinct, distinct, heavy. Kato was explicit that he excluded scars presumably caused by sucker and hook marks from cephalopod tentacles because he was tracking something else entirely. Males fighting males. Testes weight climbed right alongside scar severity. Some of what looks like squid combat on a sperm whale's head is actually whale-on-whale combat over breeding rights. That's not a complication that undermines the case. It's a filter. Once you separate parallel tooth-rake scars from circular sucker and hook scars, what's left? The wounds distinct to cephalopod contact has to come from somewhere. And Tasmanian sperm whale scarring surveys found squid-attributed sucker scars on the head region in 66% of the animals examined. That's a real number from a real sample, and it holds even after the intraspecific fighting is filtered out. So who is doing this? The colossal squid is the largest invertebrate alive by mass. Confirmed specimens have reached 494 kilograms, with some researchers estimating that squid known only from beak fragments recovered out of whale stomachs may have weighed considerably more. It lives almost exclusively in the circumantarctic Southern Ocean, adults spending most of their lives in the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones, roughly 200 to 4,000 meters down. This isn't a cryptid. It's a described, studied species, first identified in 1925 by Guy Coburn Robson. And it's worth pausing on how that identification happened, because it tells you something about how thin the direct observation record has always been. Robson didn't have a specimen. He had 2 arm crowns, pulled out of a sperm whale's stomach during the 1924 to 1925 whaling season. The species existed in science as stomach contents before it existed in science as an animal anyone had actually seen intact. Its weapons are where this case gets specific. Where a giant squid's tentacle clubs are lined with suckers, fixed rings of chitin, some serrated, effective for gripping, the colossal squid's tentacle clubs carry something else entirely. 2 rows of rotating hooks swiveling on stalks, framed by smaller rows of suckers. 22 to 25 of them per tentacle, according to specimen analysis conducted at New Zealand's National Museum, Te Papa, which holds the most complete colossal squid material in the world. These aren't decorative. They rotate. Some observations describe swiveling through a full 360 degrees, and there are accounts of rotation closer to 720, nearly 2 full turns. Scientists examining the specimens have been direct about the limits of what's known here. Nobody has confirmed whether the squid can actively control that rotation or whether it happens passively as a mechanical response to the hook catching and twisting against resistance. The mechanism is documented, the control behind it isn't. One comparison from researchers working through the anatomical difference sums up the functional split cleanly. A giant squid's arms are built for painful latching. A colossal squid's are built for ripping. The arm hooks are a separate structure from the tentacle hooks, worth distinguishing because they don't move the same way. Arm hooks sit in a fixed double row along the middle of each arm, no swivel. It's only the tentacle club hooks that rotate. And there's a deeper wrinkle in the anatomy that keeps this whole system from being as clean a binary as giant squid equals suckers, colossal squid equals hooks. Comparative morphology suggests the rotating hook likely evolved out of a modified sucker ring in the first place, not 2 unrelated weapons bolted onto 2 unrelated animals, but 2 points on the same evolutionary spectrum, with the colossal squid's version pushed toward puncture and grip rather than adhesion. Then there's the beak. Squid don't chew. Everything that goes down gets sliced first, and the colossal squid's beak is reported to be the largest of any squid species, larger, specimen for specimen, than a giant squid's. When Te Papa scientists examined the beak from their 2011 specimen, they found something that reframes the whole size question. The beak was considerably smaller than beaks that had been recovered from sperm whale stomachs elsewhere. That means the 494-kilogram animal on display in Wellington, the largest complete colossal squid ever recorded, isn't the largest colossal squid that has ever existed. Somewhere out past the reach of any trawl or longline, animals big enough to have grown that large a beak are still down there, or were. And then the eyes. 27 centimeters across on the specimen, a lens 12 centimeters wide on its own, making it the largest eye of any known animal, alive or extinct. In life, before the tissue collapsed in preservation, researchers estimate the eye may have measured closer to 30, possibly 40 centimeters. For comparison, a pelagic animal the colossal squid's size would typically only need an eye around 10 centimeters to see effectively in open water. It has 3 times that. Something is driving that eye far past what normal vision would require. The leading explanation, published by Dan Eric Nilsson and colleagues in Current Biology in 2012, is that these eyes didn't evolve to hunt. They evolved to watch. Nilsson's modeling proposed that an eye this size is uniquely suited to detecting one specific kind of signal in deep water. The disturbance a large moving body creates in a field of bioluminescent plankton. A sperm whale swimming through the mesopelagic doesn't move silently through the dark. It moves through a haze of tiny organisms that glow when disturbed, and a body the size of a whale disturbs a lot of them. The theory holds that a 30-centimeter eye could pick up that glow and the physical displacement large animals cause in it from as far away as roughly 120 meters, close to the outer working range of a sperm whale's own sonar. If the model is right, the squid may be able to see the whale coming from about as far away as the whale can hear the squid. This has to be stated with real caution because it isn't settled science. A 2013 paper by Schmitz and colleagues in BMC Evolutionary Biology challenged Nilsson's model directly, arguing that giant and colossal squid eyes aren't actually disproportionately large once you correct properly for body size, that the exceptional eye claim is an artifact of how the allometry was calculated. Nilsson's team published a rebuttal defending the core model while conceding some of the underlying parameters needed revision. As of the most recent published exchanges, this remains an open argument inside the scientific literature, not a closed case. What can be said without hedging? The eye is real. It's unmatched in the animal kingdom, and it sits on an animal that appears to rely on vision rather than hearing, because squid staticists respond mainly to low-frequency sound under 500 Hz, meaning a colossal squid is likely functionally deaf to the high-frequency clicks of an approaching sperm whale's sonar. If it's going to detect the whale at all, sight is the only tool it has to do it with. Now, the other combatant. A mature male sperm whale averages 16 meters and 45 metric tons, 3 times the mass of a female, occasionally reported larger still. It carries the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived, over 7 kilograms, 5 times the mass of a human brain. And it hunts using echolocation clicks measured at source levels up to 236 decibels underwater, the loudest sound documented from any living animal. For years, that figure fed a specific idea, that the whale doesn't just locate prey with sound, it stuns it. The hypothesis had a name in the acoustics literature. Researchers called it the biological Big Bang, the theory that a close-range burst at that intensity could debilitate or kill smaller prey outright. It was a clean idea, and it was tested directly. A 2016 study published in Scientific Reports by Face and colleagues tracked sperm whale predator-prey interactions using tagged animals and found something different from what the stunning hypothesis predicted. As the whales closed on prey, they didn't blast louder. They reduced click intensity by 20 to 40 decibels and shifted into rapid buzzing sequences, the acoustic signature of fine-scale tracking, not weaponized sound. Researchers working on sperm whale acoustics have described the stunning idea afterward as a nice theory killed by data. Whatever a sperm whale's click is doing to a colossal squid at close range, it isn't knocking it out. That actually raises the stakes on this encounter rather than lowering them. If the click isn't a weapon, then whatever happens once whale and squid are in contact has to happen through physical force alone, jaw against arm, mass against hook. And the whale's jaw carries its own limitation that the popular imagination tends to skip past. A sperm whale has teeth only in its lower jaw, 18 to 26 of them per side, each weighing close to a kilogram, fitting into sockets along an upper jaw that carries no functional teeth of its own. That means a sperm whale's bite is fundamentally asymmetric. It isn't clamping down between two rows of interlocking teeth the way most predators do. It's driving a single-toothed jaw up into a toothless upper palate, closer to a trap snapping shut against a flat surface than a true bite. Against most of its prey, squid in the 20 to 30 centimeter range, the bulk of what stomach content surveys actually find, that asymmetry doesn't matter. Against something the size and mass of a large colossal squid wrapped around the head with hooks already dug in, it might. The whale's other advantage is depth and endurance, and here the case has to correct itself again because the popular framing overstates it. Sperm whales are frequently described as diving to 3,000 meters as routine hunting behavior. Tagged whale studies tell a more modest story. Data logger surveys of foraging dives put the typical maximum depth around 325 meters, with occasional dives to 1,500. Broader oceanographic reviews put typical foraging dives in the 600 to 1,000 meter range, lasting around 45 minutes to an hour. 3,000 meters does appear at the extreme edge of the record, but that depth is the outlier, not the daily routine. What is confirmed, and remarkable enough on its own, dives past 600 meters, sustained for the better part of an hour, in absolute darkness, on a single breath. So, here is what the evidence actually allows us to reconstruct, and it has to be built the way a crime scene gets built, from the wound outward, not from imagination inward. A sperm whale descends into the mesopelagic, clicking as it goes, mapping the water in front of it by sound. Somewhere in that darkness is a colossal squid, likely stationary, likely conserving energy. Its metabolism is thought to be extraordinarily slow, requiring only around 30 grams of food a day for an animal that can weigh 500 kilograms, consistent with an ambush predator rather than an active hunter. If the bioluminescence detection theory holds, the squid doesn't need to hear the whale coming. It watches the water light up around the whale's moving bulk and gets a warning window the whale never intended to give it. What happens in the moments after contact is the one part of this reconstruction that can't be narrated as observed fact, because it never has been observed. What can be said is what the aftermath proves. Something wraps tentacles around the sensitive tissue of a whale's head and jaw, and something drives rotating hooks into skin thick enough, in measured studies, to run between 4 and 17 centimeters. Not the 50 centimeter figure sometimes claimed for sperm whales, which properly belongs to blue whales and the largest baleen species, but still tough enough that tearing through it takes real force, and a weapon actually built to do it. Whatever the whale does in response, bite, roll, drag toward the surface, try to swallow, the beak of the squid, positioned at the center of that ring of arms, may reach vulnerable tissue before the encounter ends. Some of these encounters end with the whale surfacing scarred and alive. Some end, we know from the stomach content record, with the squid consumed. What we don't have, what nobody has, is footage, sonar record, or witness testimony of the moment itself. That absence isn't a gap in this case. It's the case. Two research traditions have quietly built an entire predator-prey relationship without ever seeing it happen. And they've done it by treating a whale's body and a whale's stomach as the only two crime scenes anyone will ever get access to. Start with the stomach, because it's the more literal record. In New Zealand's Southern Ocean population studies, Te Papa researchers estimate colossal squid may make up as much as 77% of the biomass consumed by sperm whales in that region, meaning this isn't an occasional encounter for these whales. It's close to a staple. A stranding on the Bay of Biscay, examined by researcher Yves Cherel, recovered beaks from 19 separate cephalopod species inside just 3 whale stomachs. Some individual sperm whales have been found carrying beak counts in the thousands, accumulated because the beak, hard, chitinous, and indigestible, is one of the only parts of a squid a whale's stomach can't break down. It sits there. Research on beak retention rates estimates female sperm whales hold onto these fragments for roughly 2 to 2.5 days before passing them, males slightly less. That's not a long window, but it's long enough that when a whale is caught, examined, or stranded, its stomach becomes a kind of receipt for its last several days of hunting. The skin is the longer-running receipt. A stomach records days, scarring can record decades. Dalhousie University's whale scarring research notes that this kind of pronounced scarring shows up predominantly on mature males, not females, not juveniles, which lines up with something else in the record. Mature males dive deepest and longest, hunting alone in higher latitudes where the largest squid are most likely to be found. The pattern of who carries the scars matches the pattern of who goes looking in the places those scars would be earned. None of this proves the squid wins these encounters, and the case has to be honest about that, because overstating it breaks the whole thing. A fully grown sperm whale has no confirmed natural predator as an adult. Colossal squid, weight for weight, are a fraction of a mature bull's mass. An adult male sperm whale outweighs even the largest documented colossal squid by close to 100 times. What the evidence supports is narrower and, in some ways, stranger. That this is one of the very few prey relationships in the deep ocean where the prey routinely leaves a mark. Not a kill, a mark. 66% of one Tasmanian sample bearing sucker and hook scarring on the head alone. Wounds distinct enough in shape and depth that researchers studying colossal squid predation specifically could describe a wound signature separate from giant squid scarring, separate from whale-on-whale tooth rakes, a creature with no skeleton, no bone, no rigid weapon of any kind, closing an armed ring of muscle and rotating hooks around the head of the largest predator that has ever lived, and surviving that contact often enough, or losing that contact often enough, that both outcomes are written into the historical record. Scars on the whales that got away, and beaks in the whales that didn't. The sperm whale is the largest toothed predator in the history of life on Earth. It hunts using the most powerful biological sound ever measured, in the deepest, darkest water any air-breathing animal regularly enters. It carries teeth only in its lower jaw, a bite built asymmetrically against exactly the kind of prey that could exploit that asymmetry if it were large enough and armed enough to try. And on the skin of its survivors, in circular wounds and hooked gouges that don't match any other predator in that ocean, is the only physical testimony we will ever have of what happens when it meets something that doesn't simply get eaten. We've never seen the fight. We may never see it. But the marks are still there, on whales still alive today, evidence of a battle fought completely out of sight, 300 to over 1,000 meters down, between the ocean's largest hunter and one of the only prey animals down there built specifically not to go quietly. If you want more stories built this way, reconstructed from evidence instead of guesswork, subscribe for more.